The voter fraud no one is talking about.
Mr. Reagan.
Since the moment Republicans shouted election fraud after the 2020 election night fiasco, Democrats have been claiming that there is no evidence of, quote, widespread election fraud.
There is no evidence of widespread voter fraud that would change the outcome of the election.
There has been no evidence of widespread voter fraud in the 2020 election.
There's no proof of widespread voter fraud.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we've got it. We have got the evidence. This is all due to the amazing reporting of Ben Wetmore and Patty McMurray, and of course Jim Hoft over at the Gateway Pundit. This is the smoking gun, folks. It's a smoking gun of widespread voter fraud in Michigan and also indicates widespread voter fraud across the country. Now, this should be the biggest story in the country right now, and yet no one is covering it. The only one I've seen pick up the story in any significant way is Steve Bannon. No mainstream news organizations have covered this at all. Now, I'll break down this voter fraud and I will explain all of this in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. The US dollar has lost 85% of its value since the 1970s when the dollar decoupled from gold. And the government seems bent on continuing this tradition. From now until the next election, the government can print as much money as they want. The last time they did that, inflation went up 9%. This means one thing: the security of your future and your family's future, it's all in your hands. Make sure you freeze the value of the wealth that you are holding. Invest in gold with Noble Gold Investments. Gold is the one asset that is proven to withstand recession, inflation, and just about all economic threats. Noble Gold Investments is here to help you if you want to invest in gold. You will also get a 24 karat 1/4 ounce gold standard coin for free. Go to noblegoldinvestments.com right now, noblegoldinvestments.com, or simply call 1-877-646-5347, the only gold company that I trust. Donald Trump has been indicted, processed, and his mugshot taken, all because Democrats claim that Donald Trump has been lying about the 2020 election. Democrats claim that Donald Trump knows deep in his heart that the 2020 election was totally legitimate. It was perfect. There was no fraud at all.
President Trump knew the truth. He knew he had lost the election.
Trump wanted to overturn the results despite knowing within days of the election that he had lost.
Donald Trump lost an election and knew he lost an election.
They claim that his statements about election fraud have always been lies. Now, they don't claim that Donald Trump has made any kind of a mistake here. No. Their claim is that despite Donald Trump consistently and strongly asserting and reasserting his belief that the 2020 election was rigged, really, he knows the election was totally fair, and he has been intentionally lying. This is, of course, despite zero evidence. Democrats insist that you'll never be able to know what Donald Trump is thinking by asking him, or by asking his close friends, or his supporters or fellow Republicans. No. You will only ever be able to know truly what Donald Trump is thinking by asking Democrats, his political enemies. They're the only ones who actually know. They're somehow the ultimate authorities on what Donald Trump is thinking. Now, of course, we all know this is nonsense. We all know that Donald Trump genuinely believes that the 2020 election was stolen. And you know that all their absurd claims about Donald Trump's so-called big lie are just an attempt to keep him off the ballot in 2024. You all know that. But the Democrats are relentless. The Democrats are corrupt. And the Democrats will do anything, legal or otherwise, in order to stay in power. And so we must not simply expose their corruption. We must produce such overwhelming evidence of Trump's innocence that even gullible Democrat voters will finally be convinced of the truth. And so what if I told you that now we have proof of widespread voter fraud in favor of Joe Biden? The smoking gun that Democrat politicians and so-called journalists have insisted does not exist since November of 2020. What if I told you we've got it? Well, then not only would we be able to prove that Donald Trump is innocent of this big lie nonsense, but we might even be able to prove that he actually won in 2020. Let's get into it. In October 8th, 2020, a black female identifying herself as Brianna Hawkins dropped off a massive dump of voter registration applications at the Muskegon, Michigan city clerk's office. It is estimated that Hawkins delivered between 8,000 and 10,000 voter registration applications. These applications were immediately flagged as fraudulent, and the police were called. The police then followed Brianna Hawkins back to her office, which they then raided. In these offices, police found guns, silencers, burner phones, prepaid cash cards, and of course, partially filled out voter registration applications.
October of 2020, some women brought in some stacks of these registrations in Muskegon, Michigan, into the city clerk's office. We're talking about tens of thousands, we believe. But in that office, the report says 8 to 10,000. And the city clerk noticed that they all had the same handwriting. She contacted the state police. They started an investigation. They found the 2 offices locally where they were filling out these registrations. The police then raided one of these offices. When they went into these offices, Steve, they found semi-automatic weapons. They found silencers. They found bags of these prepaid cash cards. They found burner phones. It's unbelievable, this story. And we also know that this group had several offices across Michigan.
The case was referred to the FBI, who promptly buried it.
They turned it over to the FBI. And you know what happened, Steve? This will shock you, but it died. The last update was, I believe, in 2022, and it says that it's still being investigated. So you know what that means, Steve. Nothing's being done. They have done nothing with this, just like Hunter's laptop that goes to the FBI and then disappears. So this is just another instance that shows that our FBI is against the people of this country, and they're participating in stealing the elections. I think we found the culprits here.
Now, keep in mind that these were not fraudulent ballots. These were fraudulent voter registration applications. But a great way to get legitimate ballots that you would then fill in fraudulently would be to get a lot of fake voter registrations processed. So when we're talking about voter fraud, this is one step in the process of rigging an election. This is just as serious as if they'd found boxes full of fake ballots.
They were filling out registrations. This is, they need these bloated voter rolls in order to cheat and steal.
Yes.
And I believe that. That's
yes.
Something I firmly believe.
No,
it's
the predicate. When you get the mail-in, the phony ballot harvesting, the mail-in ballots, the predicate, you got to get the phony registrations. That's what they're doing in the college towns. That's what they did in Nevada. That's what they did in Pennsylvania. That's what they've done.
Right.
That is a predicate. It has to be done.
The organization that Breonna Hawkins was working for turned out to be a left-wing campaign consulting company called GBI Strategies. And this is where things get interesting. GBI Strategies is a political campaign consulting company run by Gary Bell. And according to an organization called Compo Group, Gary Bell runs 70 operations in 20 states. 20 states.
This is an organization, GBI Strategies. It's a registration organization funded by Democrats.
This organization, this single organization, GBI Strategies, was operating in 20 different states. Just imagine how many millions of potential fraudulent ballots alone came from this organization.
We also know that this same group and its GBI Strategies had offices in other swing states.
So if Gary Bell's job was to rig the presidential election in Michigan, you can bet money that his job was also to rig the presidential election in all the 20 states in which he was operating. GBI Strategies was funded by a super PAC called Black PAC. Black PAC paid GBI Strategies, get this, over $11 million in 2020 to register voters. $11 million.
Black PAC, this organization that funds Democrat causes, it says it's Black PAC. It's actually funded by white liberals. They donated, according to the FEC, $11 million in 2020 to GBI Strategies. That's a whole lot of money for people going out and creating a whole lot of registration, Steve.
Now, GBI Strategies has also been paid directly by the DNC and, of course, the Joe Biden presidential campaign. Now, a few so-called fact-check sites have attempted to cast doubt on the legitimacy of this story, but this reporting by the Gateway Pundit has just been confirmed by a left-wing newspaper in Michigan called the Detroit News. The Detroit News reached out to the office of the radically left attorney general there in Michigan, and her press secretary confirmed the fraudulent 8,000 to 10,000 voter registration applications. So we've got solid physical evidence of election fraud on a major scale in Michigan, and the organization that has committed this election fraud operates in 20 states. Again, the left keeps insisting that we have no evidence of, quote, widespread election fraud. Well, here it is. This guy, Gary Bell, is clearly one of the DNC's top henchmen for voter fraud. The question, of course, is how extensive was the voter fraud conducted by GBI Strategies and Gary Bell? But I think an even more critical question is how many other Gary Bells are out there? How many other election fraud operations has the DNC and the Biden campaign funded directly or indirectly? A sincere investigation by an even halfway decent investigative organization would uncover all of this. But no such investigation has occurred. No one has even been arrested for this. Now, as I mentioned before, this election fraud investigation was turned over to the FBI. The FBI, creating fake crimes and burying real ones since 1908.
So, Ben, I'd love to get the sort of boots on the ground perspective of what happened when you went to the city clerk's office. I'm reading the quote now. She told you, "I can't talk. I've been instructed not to talk about this." You think the cover-up goes all the way up to the FBI?
Even the clerk even let us know that it was the FBI that was really stopping all of this.
Wow.
You know, we camped out in front of her office and told her we would be willing to meet whenever she wanted to. And she kept repeating that she couldn't talk, but she let us know that, you know, the reason she couldn't talk was because she didn't have any of the ballots anymore, and that she's been instructed not to talk by what she called higher law enforcement authorities. And we said, well, is it the FBI? And she let us know that it was, and we went down to the police department, and the police, the clerk and the police here did the right thing. You know, they saw these fraudulent ballot applications. They reported it. They deserve a lot of credit for doing the right thing here. I think there are a lot of other clerks who did not do the right thing in Michigan. And the police investigated this, and when they came out to speak with us, they made no bones about it, that it was the FBI that was stonewalling all of this and stopping any investigation. And they even confided in us that, you know, they can't get answers either. You know, they want to move this investigation forward. And I think they have more than enough to indict or prosecute these people, but they're being stopped by, you know, higher law enforcement officials, you know, and it's been this way for 3 years. The statute of limitations on this is 5 years. So I think they're just waiting it out, and we'll see the end of this in 2 years, and it won't matter. No, there won't be any prosecutions.
A sincere investigation into this case in Michigan may expose enough voter fraud to overturn the entire 2020 presidential election. And no one is looking into it. No one is reporting about this. I don't get it. The only ones being investigated for election fraud in Michigan are conservatives, Trump supporters. A town clerk by the name of Stephanie Scott is being targeted. 16 Republicans that are being called fake electors are being targeted, including a town mayor and the chair of the GOP in Michigan. This is all, of course, nonsense drummed up by corrupt Democrats to try to punish and intimidate honest conservatives. But when we find physical evidence of real election fraud, nothing. It just disappears, swept under the rug. Now, I would love to see this fraud investigated properly, but that can only happen if there's a critical mass of support for such an investigation. Enough YouTubers, alternative news media organizations, and mainstream news organizations need to cover this story so that the authorities have no choice but to look into it. I'm thinking we could even see a congressional hearing or a congressional investigation into this, since the Republicans in Congress are the only ones with any kind of authority to investigate this kind of stuff, and the only kind of will to investigate this stuff. At least I hope they do. But if this widespread voter fraud could be exposed clearly, and more hard evidence could be produced in all the 20 states in which this GBI Strategies organization operates, well, then Trump would be very quickly exonerated in the Georgia case. And maybe we might even see the 2020 election finally overturned. Well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just they know so much that is not so. Good night.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man.